Hi, this is Paul Solt from iPhone Dev TV. We're going to continue the tutorial. We're now going to add some game logic. So what we've done is we're using this view containment to display different views in our screen so that we can overlay stuff onto our game. And so right now we have a pause button on our game screen, but we're actually going to want to add a label for our points. And I'm going to drag that out. And if we just resize it, that'll give us a little bit more space. We want to center it. And neither of these have auto layout yet, so we're going to add that in a second. Now what I want to do is we'll start at 0, so I'll just double click on it until I can get that to show up. And we'll hit the center attribute over on this right panel under this. And with that, we can add the auto layout. So we're going to need to set the width, and we're going to want to align it to the top and center horizontally. So I'll just hold shift and select both of those options. And you can see that's all blue, so that's good. Now we need to do the same type of thing with the pause button. I'll drag to this left corner. That'll allow me to choose the leading space, the top space. And the only thing that's missing is now we need to set the dimension. So I think if I set the width, we'll see that that does go blue. So that looks pretty good. So let's try it out. And if we hit play, we should see our score right here. We have our pause button, but we didn't set the height. So let's go in here and set the height. And then we'll start it up again. And so that's now tied right there. The other thing that's annoying for a game is we have the status bar on. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn that off. So I should be able in View Controller to implement a method. Let's see if it's here. It starts with a P, and we've got prefer status bar hidden method. So if we do this and we return yes, hopefully that will hide it. And let's go to our project settings. And then down here we have a status bar style, and under it there's this hide. So we'll just hit the hide option and let's see if that works. All right, so no status bar. And in order to protect the status bar from popping up in any of our other game view controllers, we're going to want to implement that same method. So if we type in the gameViewController.m bool, actually no, let's not type bool, let's start typing prefers, and that will give us the autocomplete. And then we can just return yes. So we always want to hide it in a video game. It gets in the way otherwise. And autocomplete is really our friend in figuring out what these things are. Otherwise, you have to search on Stack Overflow how to hide the status bar, which isn't a bad thing to do. I do recommend using Google. So if you want to hide status bar, that's exactly what I would type, hide status bar on iOS 7. And searching iOS will give you more useful things than just searching iPhone, just because that's the development language and API. So this will show you how to do it. View-based, this talks about this view controller-based status bar, which is something that you could add. It is actually enabled on iOS 7 apps, so I don't even need to set anything to make this work. So if we stop and run again, we can hit play. And now if I were to change this on the pause, let's see if this will make it appear. Nope, it doesn't appear. Let's just go into settings so I can show you what you could add here. And I don't see the setting here. So what we can do is we can add a row by hitting this little plus right here and view controller based status bar. If I just start typing that, it'll autocomplete. It's the only thing there. And we just click over here. If I say yes, it doesn't want to show up. That's okay. It's not important. It's hidden. It's going to stay hidden for us. So, all right, onward and upward with what we're working on. We're trying to get to some of the game logic here. So we added the points, but we need to be able to refer to this so that we can update it. So I need to go into the assistant editor to make this connection using the interface. And right now it's on manual, so that's not very helpful. I'm going to switch this over by clicking on where it says manual to automatic. And in here, we are going to attach our thing up at the top as a property. It's going to be an outlet for our points label. So with that, we'll be able to modify what the points are in our game. I guess next up, we're going to start implementing some game logic. So I'm just doing a really, I guess, strange game. The way it's going to work is there's going to be a red and a blue view. They're going to move around a little bit. And what we're going to do is first add them so that the user can interact with them. So let's go ahead and create two views that will just add to our current canvas. We'll call one the blue view and one the red view. And we'll make these instance variables. So up at the top where it says interface game view controller, we will create a UIView red view and then UIView blue view. So with those two created, we can come down to our view did load and we'll initialize them. And I'll do the init with frame, and here we'll make a rectangle. So CG rect make, and then it will be at 100, 100. So that's the XY coordinate. And then I want it to be 100 big and 100 tall. So with that, we have our red view created. Now I want to set the background color to red. So I'll do background color is equal to UI color, red color. And then we need to say self.view add subview, and this will add our red view. So you can do a lot with the iPhone programming stuff that doesn't even have to be game specific. You don't even need to jump into Cocos 2D to play around and prototype. You don't even need to jump into SpriteKit to do this type of stuff. So it can be really cool to see how this works. So these three lines will create a view that we can display. Now it's not interactive yet, but now we have a game object that we will be able to interact with. So let's go ahead and make a blue view. All right, so I'm going to want to move this one over a little bit. So let's put it at 300, 100. So that's going to be 300 for the X coordinate. Again, we'll make it 100, 100, and then we'll see where this puts it. As long as it's not overlapping, it's going to be good enough for me. I just want to have an initial starting position. All right, so I added a bunch of junk to the end of that I didn't want. And blue view dot background color is going to equal UI color, and then there's a special constant here where we can get a blue color. Now we could use a specific color, but this is just easy for test purposes. You can always change the color later. So we'll just add our blue view. And if we go ahead and I hit run, I use the Command R shortcut. We now have two different views. We can't interact with them yet, but we will be able to shortly. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to use a gesture recognizer to use touch input. And we can add two different gesture recognizers. So we're going to create a gesture recognizer, and this is going to be a UIPanGestureRecognizer, which allows us to drag something. So we'll call this the red gesture, and we'll create a UIPanGestureRecognizer alloc init with target. We say self here, and then we give it an action method to call. So this is going to be a selector that we need to create. So this is going to be we'll call this handle pan gesture. And if we complete that, we can then add this to our red view. So red view add gesture recognizer, and then we call this red gesture. So that is going to invoke that now. If we try to touch it, it's going to crash our app. So right now I don't have that method created. So if you try to move this, we crash. All right, so to fix that, we need to make sure that we add that method. So it's going to be void handle pan gesture. Now I'm going to use the same method for both. We're just going to need to have two different gesture recognizers created, and this will be our gesture here. So we're going to make it so that it works for both the red and the blue view. Now we'll basically do the same thing again. So we do UI pan gesture, what we call this blue gesture. You can't reuse pan gestures or gestures between different views. You always have to create a different one. So if you try to do it, only the last one that you add will actually work. I tested it and I was like, oh, that doesn't work. All right, so here's handle. We're going to use the same method, handle pan gesture. And so this is our method signature, and then here we have this one parameter that's sort of implicit. This is what gets called when we have a gesture. Now we just need to add this to our blue view, add gesture recognizer, blue gesture. Now we have this, so let's just print out something, gesture. So anytime I touch something, we should see a message print out. And so here you see it is firing as I am dragging. You can't really see that I clicked there, so let's do it here. You can see my mouse is down, then I let go and it stops. So that's dragging it. Now we want to actually drag that. So in order to do that, we're going to have to use the translation. And I guess that's more of an offset. And then we're going to need to clear translation. And we're going to have to do some different things here. So what we need to do here is we need to make sure that this is in a certain state. And I think what I want to do is I want to have sort of a condition when the user's interacting with the app and when they're not. Regardless, we always want to check the state of the gesture. And so here we'll do an if statement. And there's a few different statement or states for a gesture to be in. So when your finger's down and it's recognized, we have different states for that. So let's start typing UIGestureRecognizer. And we have all these are all different states. So these are what could be happening. And when we're interacting with this, we want the state changed. So when that is equal to gesture.state, which is the current state of the view that we're interacting with, this method is being called. And this is when we want to do our translation. And so when I say translation, this is going to be a two-dimensional direction that we're moving our finger. And so we'll just get this value from the gesture. And so we just do gesture and then translation in view, and we can just pass it gesture.view, or we could pass it the current view. Both would give us the information that we want. So gesture.view works, and I'll just go with that. Now with that, we can offset whatever view we're talking about. So I can say gesture.view, and every view has a center attribute. So a center attribute is another point, and we can modify it with the translation point. Now, if you just did something like translation, it wouldn't work. So what we'd see here is it's probably going to jump to the top left corner, and it's not on my finger. So that's not what we want, and now it's gone. That's the same thing with the blue one. So it's working for both, but it's not what we want. And so what we need to do is we need to use the current center and then just add the translation to it. So I need to create a CG point, make, and we pass it gesture.view.center .x and gesture.view.center.y. And to both of these values, we're going to add our translation. So we'll do plus translation.x, which is our x coordinate, and then translation.y. So that's going to be our offsets in both directions. We stop and run. And I have a typo, so let's fix that. So with that fixed, we hit play. I drag this, and wow, where'd it go? Just move it a little, and it's moving a ton. So here's where we need to clear the translation. The translation is really building up, and it keeps on adding to the current position, which is not what we want exactly. And so we'll say gesture set translation. And if we just set it to CG.0, that will clear it for us. And we'll say gesture.view here. And with that, I'll go and start it again. And now we have two interactive squares. So that's kind of cool. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get points every time we do that. So let's create a points variable. We'll scroll up to the top. And I guess this is going to be an int type. So int points. And we still have our points label. So there's two things here. We have this variable that's going to track our points. And then we have this label where we can display it. So here we can access our instance variable points, and we can add to it. So plus equals, and I want to get the translation.x. And then I want to get the translation.y. So we'll go ahead, we'll run it. We'll see what happens. We're not seeing any points because we're not displaying it. So let's go ahead and display it. So self.pointsLabel.text is going to be equal to, now I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to do a square bracket and then the @ symbol. And then inside of this, we're going to have an expression. So here I can sort of box up this variable and then get a string value from it. So what we're doing right here is we're converting our int value into an NSNumber object. An NSNumber object has a method called string value. So if I hold Option and click on it, you can see that we're working with the NSNumber class. So this is just some shortcuts to get our NSNumber without having to do all the work, and we get a string value which we can then display. And if we go ahead and run, you see, oh, wow, but we're getting negative points. So we're not quite what I want. So I'm going to modify the algorithm so that it's always the absolute value. So let's do ABS, and this is a absolute value function. And if we go like this, that will add the absolute value of those translation points. So our number always will go up. Now we drag around, the number keeps going up, it never goes down. So that's kind of cool. And if I hold the Alt key, I can grab 2 views, and you can see I can move them around for extra points. All right, to make this a game, I want to have a game loop. And so that's something that we don't have right now. We just have a basic thing where we can add points, but we don't actually have a game update loop. And game update loops are important because they allow us to not only animate things, but they also allow us to check collisions and to check if the game is over. And so without a loop running, our game isn't really a game. There's no way to know what's going on. There's no way to animate anything. And so in the next video, we will get into writing the game loop that will run our logic and allow us an entry point where we can control the different aspects of the game.